Your eyes have never worked the way you think they do. Right now, each one has a hole in it, and your brain has been hiding that fact from you since the day you were born. Here's the anatomy behind it. At the back of your eye sits the retina, a thin layer of light-sensitive cells that convert incoming light into electrical signals your brain can interpret as images. Every part of the retina is covered in these light-sensitive cells, called photoreceptors, except for one small region, the spot where the optic nerve exits the eye on its way to the brain. That exit point has no room for photoreceptors at all because the nerve fibers themselves take up the space. The result is a genuine physical gap in your vision, a small patch directly in your field of view where your eye captures no visual information whatsoever. Not blurry, not dim, not colorless, nothing. A true absence of data. This blind spot isn't a rare defect or a symptom of poor eyesight. Every single person with functioning eyes has one in each eye, positioned slightly toward the nose side of your central vision, and it's large enough that at a typical reading distance, it could hide an object several inches across without you ever perceiving that anything was missing. People have known about this for far longer than most assume. In the late 1600s, a French physicist named Edmé Mariotte demonstrated the blind spot to the court of King Charles II of England, using nothing more than two small marks on a piece of paper. He had observers close one eye, focus on one mark, and slowly move the paper toward and away from their face. At a specific distance, the second mark would completely disappear from view, even though nothing was physically obstructing it. The demonstration reportedly became something of a court amusement, since it worked on every single person who tried it, regardless of who they were. Mariotte had identified something structural and universal about human eyesight using nothing more sophisticated than paper and a steady hand, more than 3 centuries before anyone understood the underlying neuroscience of why it happened. Here's where it gets stranger. Your brain doesn't simply ignore this gap or leave it dark, it actively fills it in. Using information from the surrounding visual area, along with input from your other eye, your brain constructs a seamless, continuous image and papers directly over the missing patch with a plausible guess about what's probably there. If you're looking at a plain wall, your brain fills the blind spot with more plain wall. If you're looking at a patterned carpet, your brain extends that pattern straight through the gap. This isn't a conscious process you can catch happening. It occurs automatically, continuously, and so convincingly that most people go their entire lives without any indication that a piece of their visual field is missing at all. With both eyes open, this effect is essentially undetectable, since each eye's blind spot sits in a different part of the visual field, and each eye compensates for the other's gap using its own complete information from that region. But the blind spot doesn't disappear just because you're using two eyes. It's still there in each individual eye, all the time, whether the other eye is open or not. Modern vision researchers have refined Mariotte's original demonstration considerably, using controlled lab conditions to map the exact size, shape, and position of each person's blind spot with precision. Close one eye, focus on a specific point, and slowly move a small object through the right position in your peripheral vision and at exactly the right distance. That object will completely vanish, not fade, not blur, simply disappear, replaced by whatever your brain has decided should logically be there instead. What makes this especially strange is that the illusion holds up under direct testing, even when you already know intellectually that the blind spot exists and roughly where to look for it. Knowing the trick doesn't break the illusion. Your visual system doesn't consult your conscious beliefs about what should be there. It simply generates a continuous, filled-in picture at a level of processing your conscious awareness has no direct access to, and hands you the finished result as if it had been complete all along. Researchers studying this process have found that the brain's fill-in strategy isn't random guessing. It follows fairly predictable rules based on the immediate surrounding visual context. Experiments using deliberately altered patterns near the blind spot have shown that the brain will extend lines, colors, and textures directly through the gap in ways that closely match whatever pattern exists just outside it, even when the true content hidden behind the blind spot is something entirely different. In carefully designed lab conditions, researchers can place a genuinely different image inside the blind spot's exact location, and observers will still report seeing the extended, predicted pattern instead of anything resembling what's actually there. because their visual system never received any information from that region to begin with. There was nothing to override. The brain simply had a gap and filled it with its best statistical guess. This same fill-in process shows up, in smaller and less obvious ways, throughout ordinary daily life, usually without anyone noticing at all. Drivers occasionally fail to see a motorcycle or pedestrian positioned at exactly the wrong angle relative to their blind spot. Not because of inattention, but because the object briefly falls into the small region where the eye captures nothing, and the brain quietly fills the space with an assumption of empty road instead. Vision researchers have pointed to this as one contributing factor, among several others, in certain categories of traffic incidents, precisely because the failure isn't a matter of looking carelessly. The information genuinely never reached the brain in the first place, and the fill-in process simply completed the scene as if nothing were missing. This connects to something larger about how perception works in general. What you experience as seeing isn't a live, unedited video feed from your eyes straight to your consciousness. It's a heavily processed, actively constructed model, built by your brain from incomplete, gap-filled, and reconstructed information, then presented to you with total confidence as a seamless whole. The blind spot is simply the most literal, physically demonstrable example of this. There's a real, measurable place where your eye is capturing nothing, and yet your subjective experience contains no gap, no dark patch, no missing piece at all. Some researchers studying visual perception argue that this same fill-in process, operating at a much smaller and more constant scale, is happening across your entire visual field at all times, smoothing over the natural blurriness of peripheral vision, compensating for the rapid, jittery movements your eyes make dozens of times per second, and stitching together a far more polished final image than what your eyes are technically capturing moment to moment. Even color perception near the edges of your vision benefits from a version of this same process. The photoreceptors responsible for detecting color are heavily concentrated near the center of the retina, meaning your peripheral vision is far less sensitive to color than most people assume. Objects at the far edges of your visual field are often perceived in far less color detail than you'd expect. Yet your overall visual experience rarely feels desaturated or gray at the edges, because your brain extends color information inward from your central vision and applies a plausible estimate to the periphery. The same basic strategy used to paper over the blind spot, just spread more subtly across your entire field of view rather than concentrated in one specific spot. Which raises an uncomfortable, quieter question that extends well beyond eyesight. If your visual system can convincingly paper over a genuine permanent hole in your vision without you ever detecting it, using nothing but plausible guesses based on surrounding context, it's worth wondering how much else about your moment-to-moment experience of reality is being filled in the same way, quietly, confidently, and completely undetectably, without your awareness ever being given the chance to notice the seams. You've been looking at the world your entire life with a hole in each eye, and not once has it looked like anything was missing.